Hello everyone, and a massive thank you to Dr. Paul Mason for inviting me here today as a guest speaker. I feel extremely honoured and privileged. My name is Debra Scott. I don't have any medical qualifications. I'm just an ordinary mum with an enormous passion to change current nutritional guidelines for the reasons I'm about to highlight. If you told me 3 years ago I'd be sitting in front of anyone at all, let alone thousands of people around the world, giving a talk on how to control blood sugars, lose weight and a raft of other health benefits, you could have knocked me down with a feather. I'd have run a mile. But if sharing my journey helps just one person, I'm extremely happy. So here I am. This is the furthest I've travelled, to be honest, quite literally the other side of the world, albeit virtually. This is my story, and please bear in mind I am just one of so many with similar stories to tell. My journey started in December 2017 when I went to the doctor with some very worrying symptoms. I was putting them down as an age thing, the menopause, but they became severe and unrelenting, and I honestly then thought it could be something sinister. My doctor arranged for blood tests to be done and a scan. The scan showed a fatty liver, and the blood results weren't good either. In fact, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, with a HbA1c of 62. I won't ever forget those words from my nurse. You have type 2 diabetes. It is a progressive disease. I was angry with myself as I thought it was my fault, letting myself become overweight, not exercising. I later learned not to blame myself. In fact, my body had started to struggle dealing with the amount of sugar I was eating, and what it couldn't deal with, it was storing as fat. It was very clear that much of that was around my tummy and obviously in my liver. Weight gain is a symptom and not a cause, and I do have a genetic link also. And as for exercise, you can't outrun a bad diet. I was devastated with my diagnosis. I had seen what type 2 diabetes had done to my dear mum. She was registered blind in her 60s, she had neuropathy, so much so she didn't feel it when the car door slammed on her fingers. Sores on her legs that wouldn't heal, she had a stroke and a multitude of other health issues. None of her medication seemed to help, she just became progressively worse in fact, ending up injecting insulin, which still didn't improve things. I was handed a booklet by the nurse to take away with me, and she drew out for me what I should be eating. This is the actual drawing. I was told to avoid cakes and biscuits and anything sweet basically. The advice was to eat lots of starchy carbohydrates, plenty of fruit, very little red meat and choose low-fat products. I was apparently 25 kilos overweight and I was encouraged to lose weight and exercise. I was prescribed medication straight away, metformin and statins, and I was told I would have to go onto blood pressure medication if that didn't come down, as my readings were both in the red zones. I declined the medication and asked for 2 months to try a change in diet. I didn't know what that was going to be, as I felt I ate quite healthily: wholemeal bread, rice, pasta, jacket potatoes, cereals with all those healthy symbols on the packets, and I loved bananas, often having 2 for a working lunch. All was to become clear. I went home, and after I stopped sobbing in my husband's arms, I turned to Google. Just 2 words: reversing diabetes. And this took me to diabetes.co.uk and its fabulous forum with so many worldwide success stories. Here is just one of those inspirational stories springing to life. This is Mark, an absolute superstar, a mine of information that he happily shares on a daily basis. He was just one of a multitude of people that helped guide me back to full health and who support others on their journeys. So, what was the advice from the experts, the diabetics themselves? Avoid the nutritional guidelines and go low carb. The same advice, in fact, on every single forum I visited, even the National Health Service one, exactly the opposite to what I'd been advised. OK, I didn't actually know what a carb was, so I googled again, and it turns out carbs turn to sugar. Savoury foods are broken down into glucose. How did I not know this? I should have listened at school. So it made perfect sense. These slides can be found on the Public Health Collaboration website. They make the amount of sugar in food very clear. The brainchild of an amazing doctor, Dr. David Unwin. What he and many others are doing for diabetics is phenomenal, and I also recommend Diet Doctor, which is full of amazing resources, infographics, videos, recipes and much more, many which are completely free. You could just Google your favourite meals and add low carb. Since reversing my diabetes, I started to travel around, doing talks and presentations, sharing my journey, taking a suitcase full of books, leaflets, food and drink with me. Seeing the sugar equivalents really helps people get it. This is one of my displays, all done via Zoom these days, but still getting the message out there. So the solution was to eat low carb, medium protein and healthy fats. At that time, I wasn't aware there was such a thing as healthy fats. In fact, many low-fat products are highly processed and have the fat, the tasty bit, taken out and sugar and many other unhealthy ingredients added. So really not at all good, especially for diabetics. And the advice was to avoid ultra-processed foods and drinks as they're full of added sugar and undesirable ingredients, and read labels. One of the biggest surprises came with sausages. The difference between the lowest and the highest carb content was staggering. This was put together by a forum member. Choosing well can make all the difference to blood sugar control. You can't go wrong eating real food, just like your grandparents and their parents before them. Avoid anything that comes in packaging, basically. In the signature boxes of forum members, I could see their own journeys. Not just blood sugar levels plummeting, but significant weight loss. I put this together at that time. I feel it's a very powerful piece of paper showing just what can be achieved when you eat the right way. On the right is a photo of another of the forum superstars, Yvonne. She regained control of her health and now helps others, as many members do. Their help is invaluable, especially so during the challenging times we are living in. Many also reducing their blood pressure and cholesterol levels, and it was apparently good for so many other health issues. I ended up collating the many health benefits I came across, and this slide is the result. The forum members' advice was to test different foods with a glucose monitor, see which spiked me and avoid or reduce portion size accordingly, and keep a food diary. We're all different and it's not one size fits all. Hence, testing is important. It's the best investment I've ever made, to be honest. If you don't test, it's like crossing the road blindfolded, in my opinion. The worst culprits were, in fact, starchy carbs and even some fruit. They sent my blood sugar so high. Here are the results using my continuous blood glucose monitor. This was just a medium-sized jacket potato with a little butter. On the left of this slide is an ordinary wholemeal bread, and on the right is a low-carb alternative. As a comparison to savoury food, I have included a slide of my experience of just one donut. I didn't eat all of these, just the one. And here I ate an average portion of rice. No significant rise, but it took a while to come back down. This is pasta, and the similar occurred there. This was just one medium-sized banana. For these tests, I didn't eat again until my blood sugars came back down. In the real world, both diabetics and non-diabetics are advised to eat regularly, with plenty of fruit encouraged. High blood sugar levels, especially when prolonged, can lead to complications. Low carb, on the other hand, has hardly any impact on blood glucose levels and keeps my insulin pretty much redundant. A much healthier option, especially as insulin is known as the fat storage hormone. I totalled up my daily carb intake prior to diagnosis, on average about 300 grams a day. It's very easy to get there. To put that into perspective, I probably have on average 30 grams these days. Again, that's very easy to do. I'm often under 20 grams. The starchy carbs need lots of insulin to deal with them. Consistently high levels can lead to the cells becoming insulin resistant and weight gain, and of course type 2 diabetes. High insulin levels result in a vicious cycle. Avoiding the foods that send blood sugars high would keep you off the blood sugar roller coaster, away from feeling constantly tired and hungry. So I eliminated the foods that spiked me and swapped them for the food that didn't, basically. It was that simple. I have more variety than I had before, and these are the swaps that worked for me. I put my diabetes into reverse within weeks by following the low-carb way of eating. I don't call it a diet because on all the diets I've done in my lifetime, and I think I've probably covered the majority, I've not been able to get food off my mind, and I've felt constantly hungry and deprived. I didn't sustain the weight loss for long either. I ended up putting it all back on. Not so with low carb. The fats keep you full for longer, I rarely feel hungry, and I have no food cravings. I now class fat as my friend and no longer my enemy. But the most important result was my symptoms disappeared within days and I felt well again. My blood sugars were in the pre-diabetic range by the 2-month appointment and non-diabetic range on my 6-month appointment, where they remain almost 3 years later. My diabetic nurse was in shock, and this I find sad. If only they gave out low carb advice, things could be so different. I explain how carbs work in the body. Education is definitely the key. A welcome side effect to going low carb was that I lost all the excess weight I'd put on. My weight loss was rapid. I lost 25 kilos in just 7 months. The fat just melted away. When you lower your carb intake, your body uses fat for fuel, and that's why low carb works so well for weight loss. And I'm maintaining my weight loss almost 3 years, even through a pandemic. I still pinch myself about that after struggling for so many years with my weight. At all my subsequent 6 monthly reviews, my health markers have been optimal, including my blood pressure. Speaking of blood pressure, I'd like to introduce you to my wonderful husband, Eric. He himself lost 10 kilos following low carb. He isn't diabetic, but needed to lose some weight. His blood pressure was elevated. His blood pressure reduced significantly within a few days, as you can see by this graph. I call low carb my miracle cure, and my diagnosis a blessing in disguise, going from being ashamed to tell anyone I was diabetic because of the stigma attached, to literally telling the world. I would just like to add one very important thing. If you are on medication for diabetes and want to try low carb, I would advise you to work very closely with your doctor or healthcare professional, as the medication will need to be reduced accordingly as you go along. I have seen many coming off all medication, even insulin, so this point is very important. Before I finish, I would just like to touch on my brush with COVID-19. It was in the very early days, and I feel that my much improved metabolic health helped me to combat it. I had my first antibody test in May 2020 and my last one in May 2021, and I'm very happy to say they're still going strong. And finally, the message I hope you will take away today is that type 2 diabetes does not have to be progressive. It can indeed be put into reverse. Patient choice is important, and we must be offered low carb advice. I will leave you with some favourite quotes from diabetes.co.uk forum members. A lovely way to finish, I feel, and thank you for listening today.
That was a great story, and I just think these stories are so important to get our message out there. I mean, it's all very well to have great science and complex sort of issues discussed, but what people want to hear are personal stories, and I think that's a really powerful way of getting our message out there to the community. People like Debra are just so important in this campaign.
Absolutely, just to even see what's possible. And believe it or not, there's actually a good body of research that demonstrates that if we're trying to communicate of scientific ideas, often narrative is a much better way of doing it rather than dry science. So, not a lot of people have an appetite for p-values and confidence intervals and things like this. But when you put something like Debra's experience in front of you, it's hard to ignore.
Well, people love a story, and I think that's a great way of communicating a message by means of a story.